Light dusting of snow. I cannot imagine what an actual snowstorm would do.
Nick Wells making his way to the cage here. He is still just 20 years old, 1-2, with a submission win, representing the Immortal Way. Had his first couple of fights, first 3 fights actually at 155 pounds, now coming up to 170 pounds for this fight against Luke DeYoung. He was a 4-time varsity wrestler at Western Brown High School in Georgetown, Ohio. And I don't know if you remember earlier this year, he had one of the bloodiest fights I think I've ever seen when he took on Vincent Stetzel at Hardrock 89. And that fight was stopped due to a cut over his eye, but came back and was able to submit Vincent in his last bout. So pick up his first amateur win. Got another fighter here representing Vision MMA and Luke DeYoung, 19 years old. Had a submission win over Anthony Roach back at Heritage Hall, Hardrock MMA 93 in October. This is going to be your classic grappler versus striker. The grappler, Nick Wells, against the striker, Luke DeYoung. You see Vision MMA, Jeremy Pender with the black eye, courtesy of his fight last night in the Philadelphia area. But coming here tonight to corner his guy, making that 8.5-hour drive back to Ohio.
Now, that was Hardrock MMA 93 in Lexington. Luke DeYoung's victory over Anthony Roach. It was a heck of a matchup between a wrestler and what turned out to be Luke DeYoung and his jiu-jitsu skills. But that was a classic. I remember Roach was trying to take the fight down the entire time, and Luke DeYoung was able to capitalize on the ground. We'll see if he'll be able to continue with his jiu-jitsu prowess in tonight's fight.
Nick Wells in the black and red, Luke DeYoung in the gray. Rob Mooney, third man in the cage here tonight. See the glove touch here. You see a huge size advantage here for Luke DeYoung. Taller and just a bigger frame. As you mentioned, Nick Wells coming up from 155 pounds for this fight. I believe Nick Wells was originally supposed to face Eli Mefford, who we saw pick up a win earlier tonight. Sort of a late switch, taking on Luke DeYoung. Definitely a game fighter willing to come up and face a tough opponent like Luke DeYoung. A little bit of a feeling out process here. See those leg kicks from Nick Wells. Another leg kick. You see DeYoung, that body kick and then a big right hand.
Nick Wells not shying away from any of the contact. Looks like he's smiling in between exchanges.
Yeah, his nickname is Smiley, so definitely a well-earned nickname. He's got to fight, got to get his back off the cage if he wants to be able to put some power into some big shots here.
Luke DeYoung being patient, trying to capitalize on his height and reach advantage.
Big left hook there, just misses for Nick Wells.
Nick Wells continuing with his enthusiasm between the exchanges.
Wells eating up that left leg of Luke DeYoung with those leg kicks. A little bit of a flurry there. He's just popping off those leg kicks like they're jabs. It's eventually going to hurt the ability for DeYoung to start spring into those big strikes. You see a little bit of a welt, and you already see him maybe favoring that left leg just a little bit. And if I'm Nick Wells' corner, I'm telling him, feed him those leg kicks. There's a big right hand from Nick Wells. Left hand there from DeYoung lands.
There is a substantial height and reach disparity.
Wells eats a body kick there. You see him trying to that left hook counter every single time that DeYoung throws that body kick. "20 seconds left here in the first round. Been all striking thus far, and you got to think that Nick Wells is getting the better of the striking with all those kicks here in the first round. Flurry there misses from DeYoung, and Wells trying to finish the first round strong. Putting his hands down. Gotta love the swagger there of Nick Wells. Different type of fighter than we've seen from Nick Wells in his first 3 fights. I mean, he's been a guy who has tried to come in and bull rush his opponents and use his wrestling, but here against the striker and Luke DeYoung, willing to stand and trade for the first round. See Jeremy Pinder there in the corner of Luke DeYoung.
Couldn't ask for a more really experienced guy to be cornering you. What do you think Pender is telling Luke DeYoung between the rounds?
You know, I think he's probably telling him to just throw more shots. You know, you definitely want to pick your shots, but you probably want to you have to have a little bit more output. I think that Nick Wells just won that first round basically on output and being able to land those leg kicks and feed him those leg kicks, and really not with too much else other than that. I mean, he didn't land a bunch of punches, and maybe even just try to corner him. I know that we have a circular cage, so it's hard to kind of corner a guy and back him up into a corner, but cut off the angles.
Okay.
And use your hooks here as well. Use your hooks to basically step in and maybe try to drop him here with a big left hook.
They're yelling back and forth at each other. I like this. A little bit of maybe Diaz action. They're both having fun. I like that.
Wells.
What a game performer is Nick Wells. I mean, he's yelling, and he knows he's the smaller guy, David versus Goliath.
DeYoung now starting with the kicks. He also needs to be a little bit on the outside, use that range.
A little bit, maybe some push kicks.
You see that left leg. Big welt starting. See the redness of it. See him busting some of those blood vessels in that leg is Nick Wells.
Wow.
And that one looked like it might be the beginning of where that leg starts to break down.
If I'm Brandon Hardrock Higdon, I'm saying I like this Nick Wells guy regardless. I mean, he's bringing energy, and the fans, the crowd here, has to love this performance.
You know, and the reason why Wells is able to land so many of those leg kicks is because Luke DeYoung is heavy on that front left leg and just leaving it out there for Wells to land those strikes. And there's the takedown from Nick Wells. Nice double leg. Ends up in the guard of Luke DeYoung. Minute 43 to work here in the second round. See what the ground game of Luke DeYoung looks like here. Definitely a long, lanky guy.
Keep in mind, Luke DeYoung is 1-0 in his amateur career, won his only fight via triangle.
Looks like he might be working for another triangle here. You see him starting to work this high guard as Wells tries to posture up here, get on his knees. Maybe even make it to his feet. So he tries to throw some shots over the top there.
Maybe difficult to position for a triangle this far against the cage.
Yeah, but you can see him definitely working that higher guard here. Now seeing him trying to throw that left leg up. Wells doing a good job, though, of posturing in the triangle, not letting Luke DeYoung put that leg over his head. You also have to be able to get the angle for the triangle as well. And Wells doing a good job of it's really more of a term that you use in striking, but kind of cutting the angles and not letting Luke DeYoung spin those hips out and get on the side. And that's one of the big advantages of having a really good wrestling base is you're able to control the guy, use your hips to be able to control the guy on the bottom, not let him swing out for an armbar or a triangle.
Luke DeYoung is trying to control the hands of Nick Wells, A, to avoid letting him punch him, but B, also maybe to push one of those arms in position for the triangle. You got to love the enthusiasm from Nick Wells.
Helping Luke DeYoung up, and
he said, hell yeah, just like, let's keep going. Can we go a couple more rounds, he's wanting to say.
Yeah, and I think that it's he's definitely feeling pretty good in between rounds 2 and 3, because at least on our scorecard, at least on my scorecard, I think he's up a couple of rounds against a bigger, taller, lankier opponent who comes from a really well-respected gym like Vision.
If you're advising Nick Wells, are you saying, hey man, this may not be your weight class, let's try to stay down at 155, or are you saying bring it on? I mean,
the Cameron Van Camp and go up weight classes, or
yes.
Conor McGregor?
Yes, I mean this doesn't seem to be much of a disadvantage. Maybe he's dancing, he's singing, maybe almost a mental edge that's factoring in to Nick Wells and his advantage that you and I both believe has helped him through these first 2 rounds, probably to win the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that a lot of people don't realize is Nick Wells probably didn't have to cut weight at all for this fight. And so he's coming in at 100% and not having to dehydrate himself the day before the fight. And Luke DeYoung looks like a much bigger guy, so I'm sure he probably had to cut some weight. So I'm sure Nick Wells does feel amazing.
He's feeling
right
good.
Now
He's dancing and he's singing to Nelly right now. I mean, if there's anything that's reflective of you feeling good, it's that.
Round number 3 here, Luke DeYoung in the gray trunks, Nick Wells in the red and black. Rob Mooney getting him started here in round number 3. Another leg kick there from Nick Wells. And
wow.
Luke DeYoung says, here, I'll show you, I'll kick you in the head if you kick me in the leg. And those head kicks a lot. I mean, even sometimes if they're blocked, can put a guy to sleep.
Yeah.
If there's enough power.
You can win the first 2 rounds, and that's great. But if you have a bigger guy like Luke DeYoung connect with one of those head kicks,
Nick Wells was looking for a takedown, but Luke DeYoung looking to try to pull guard here. Maybe try to finish this guillotine. I'm never a fan of trying to pull guard in an MMA fight because...
Why doesn't Nick Wells just slam him down?
Maybe just trying to shake him off here, it looks like.
You can lose the fight like this, though, right? I remember Renzo Gracie getting Miletich. You know, there's been many cases.
It's going to be hard for him to crank enough to be able to finish that choke.
Well,
Nick Wells out.
Very tough.
Doing a good job of just peeling that right arm of Luke DeYoung off of his head. See Luke DeYoung maybe trying to spin here for an arm bar. But again, Nick Wells just heavy on top and able to control his opponent with those good hips, that wrestling base on the ground.
He's saying, you can have it in your guard. I'll control the fight I'll be on the top and I'll get some punches in.
Yeah, and a lot of times I think that's almost a sort of an innate ability that a wrestler has. It's not something that can be easily taught. I think it's just from the thousands and thousands of hours of being on the mats and wrestling and knowing how to control your opponent on the ground. You see the great shot there of the welts on that left leg of Luke DeYoung.
If you think leg kicks do not hurt, take a look at Luke DeYoung's leg right now, his right thigh.
And he's trying to spin out here, trying to use the cage to walk and try to lock in an arm bar. Looks like he may have this here, and Nick Wells needs to do a good job here of continuing to stack Luke DeYoung to try to fight his way out of this armbar and pop his elbow past the cup.
Something tells me it will not be easy to get Nick Wells to tap.
As those legs cross, though, don't want to do that with an arm bar.
No.
And Luke just trying to pop out the back here. Looks like Nick Wells might, I thought for a second he might be out, but it looks like DeYoung, 20 seconds left here in the third round. And this may be a Luke DeYoung round with the 2 submission attempts. Three seconds left here. See if Nick Wells can survive. And he does. Great fight.
Great fight. Very impressive performance by both competitors. And as I said earlier, Nick Wells, as far as I'm concerned, has a permanent spot on the Hardrock roster.
Yeah, and I think being willing to fight anybody at any weight class, and also just being not only that, but also being an exciting fighter.
Yes. Not enough can be said for absolute enthusiasm, regardless of moving up in weight or having a big size disadvantage.
I'm definitely a fan after that performance. We await the official result from the judges, the official decision. Our unofficial scorecards, I believe we have the first 2 rounds going at least to Nick Wells. I think that third round might have been stolen by Luke DeYoung. Nevertheless, Jason Weiner will tell us the official result.
Ladies and gentlemen, for our official decision, give it up for both Luke DeYoung and Nick Wells. We go to the judges' scorecards after 3 rounds. Judges 1 and 2 for the ballot. 30-27, and judges 3, 29-28 for the winner by unanimous decision,
Nick Wells moving up to 2-2. What a performance.
Really was.
Coming up in weight class, taking on a tough opponent in Luke DeYoung. And
Credit that to a very strong wrestling foundation, along